Rumi is the best-selling poet of all time. If you mention him in Turkey, no one will know who you're talking about. Instead, they call him Mevlana. Rumi has become a pillar of Turkish cultural identity. And if you ask a Turkish person, where is Rumi from? They won't know who you're talking about. But if you say Mevlana, they'll say, oh yes, Hazreti Mevlana, which means it's Hazret is the same title that they use for Jesus and other holy men who are like holy but not quite a prophet. So when you ask them, they'll say, oh yes, he's Turkish. Now, in the time that he was teaching, Rumi said, Sema, which is this dance of turning around in circles, is more important than prayer. At the time, and even today, among most Muslims, this is so far removed from what they would consider as acceptable, and rejecting things like praying 5 times a day, rejecting any practices of Muhammad or his followers would have gotten him killed. It was his introduction to Shams Tabriz that heralded in Rumi's period of his new philosophy. Before having met Shams, he was a religious scholar. Shams is what was called a traveling dervish. And after they met, he began writing poetry. He completely changed his philosophy. If you read some of the works of Rumi that he wrote later in his life, many of them were longing pieces. Come back, where did you go? Where are you? Now, this is on one hand longing for God. It was also a longing for his guru who left him Shams Tabriz. There are a couple of stories around what happened to Shams. When he came into Rumi's life, everything changed for Rumi. He would spend days alone, fasting, because his philosophy completely changed. Now, the people around Rumi, specifically his son, were not happy of this newcomer having so much impact on their father. Also, the people in the area were Turks, and they didn't like this new man who was coming from Persia. Now, it's also something which I personally found ironic. Turks love to talk about Mevlana, who came from another country, as an immigrant. Basically, in Turkish culture, going all the way back through the Ottoman Empire, Turks didn't like foreigners. Turks, even today, have a very big problem with people who come from other countries, especially further east than themselves. So, today, if Turks meet anyone from Afghanistan who's living in Turkey, or anyone from Iran, Tajikistan, they won't like that person. And if that person says, oh, Rumi was writing in Farsi, they'll say, no, it's not true. Absolutely, it's not true. But here's this man who came to Turkey, who didn't learn Turkish, and they're treating him like he was their sultan. I would say he's held in high regard, very close to Ataturk in Turkish society. But that's only because they identify him as a Turk, which he was not, which he would not want to be. Indeed, the memory of Rumi has been taken hostage by the Turkish people, by Turkish culture, we can say. Rumi's most important work, if you ask any scholars who work on him, was Masnavi. Masnavi, Rumi loves to mention wine. Rumi loves to mention being drunk. Indeed, wine itself originated from the Persian Empire. When you go to Konya, if you ask people, Where can I find a beer? Where can I find wine? Where can I find alcohol? You'll be greeted with a tremendous amount of hostility. Although most people are, indeed, I can't say most people, but the highest rate of alcoholism in Turkey is in Konya. If you listen to Rumi's poetry from, we can say, the last 10 years of his life, you will hear great sorrow in his voice. Rumi was in mourning for a large portion of the end of his life because his guru, his teacher, Shams, suddenly disappeared. Some people say Shams was killed by Rumi's son. Some people say Shams left and disappeared. So if we want to find someone who can represent Turkey, it's a much better idea that Rumi's son can represent Turkey rather than Rumi himself, who was very much against religious extremism, very against any kind of extreme thought. Indeed, Rumi never discounted Islam as a way to reach God. Rather, he said, every religion, every man has his own path, which is completely against, 180 degrees in the opposite direction, against what conventional Muslim thought would say. What it says today, what it says yesterday, what it said at the time of the Muhammad. The Sema that you will find in Turkey is not real Sema. All of Mevlana''s poems begin as follows. Listen to the ney. Ney is a flute. Every text from the Ottoman Empire, from the Turks, if you look at anything from the Sultan, begin with, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, and his Prophet Muhammad. When Sema was conducted by Mevlana, by Rumi and his true followers, they were reciting poetry and playing instruments. When you see, indeed, you cannot see in Turkey any Sufi dancers, anyone dancing Sema, without hearing them recite the Quran.
بشنو از نی چون حکایت می کند وز جدایی ها شکایت می کند